All right, we're live. So today we got, man. Look, I love the energy. Like Brett is my type of guy. What is your what's your zodiac sign?
Scorpio.
Scorpio, man. You
Anybody
fooled
that
me.
knows that stuff, the first thing they go is, "Oh man, that guy's mercurial."
Uh-huh. Oh, what is your your rising sign?
No, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah. So it's how you appear to people. So I'm a Sagittarius moon. Like that's what most people know their moon sign. But
Okay.
your rising sign is like how you appear to people. So I appear to be a Virgo. Right.
Okay.
So like anytime someone has like super high energy, I just assume they're probably like a fire sign. So I was like,
Okay.
yeah, I thought you
Yeah,
were a
my
fire
okay,
sign.
so then my rising sign is get up jacked. Let's go. All right.
Yeah, I like to say my zodiac sign is money. So awesome. So
I'm not, I and for all you watching that have kids that are hyperactive, got kicked out of school a lot. This is what happens when you grow up, okay?
Awesome. So I want to introduce my guest, and then I'm gonna let him introduce himself. So Brett is just someone I added on Facebook. He joined my community. We've been, engaging with each other's content, and I learned a thing or two about him, and I wanted to introduce him to my audience. If you don't know him, right? Number one, what we're gonna be talking about is remote sales concepts, remote sales systems, remote sales teams, right? So if you don't know Brett, he was a pioneer in internet-based remote sales. He started around in the late 90s, right? As a seven-figure remote sales pro, he's earned as much as $350K in a month in commissions, right? In his previous sales career, he was considered one of the best in his niche, top 1 out of 10 of 1% of the world. With one company, he was the primary driving force behind their sales going from 170K per month to 23 million in a month, and that was from internet-based lead generation and sales automation systems. And then you also had 10,000, tens of thousands of affiliates marketing it globally, right? So with that being said, I'm looking forward to just talking about sales. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself to the people, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So, when I got into this remote sales concept, it was really kind of serendipitous. I'd gone up to Alaska. My folks had moved up there, and I had to restart. My dad's health was declining. I had two businesses down in Texas, and this was around 98. And I got on the internet and I was trying to figure out, what to do next, basically. And I got online and I literally spent, like a job, I spent 3 months just searching the internet. I literally had an agenda. One was I knew I wasn't going to be in Alaska forever. So I wanted to find something where I wasn't geographically challenged. I could go someplace else. The second thing is I wanted to leverage my talents. I had been very good at sales. So I didn't have this. I don't have this thing like, I struggled in sales. I had an aptitude. I was very good. My problem in sales was when I first started doing professional sales was I was working for companies that, weren't very ethical. They didn't know what they're doing. And I ended up starting my own business. That was the catalyst for starting my own business. And it was always about sales. So now we're on the internet. And the next thing I wanted to do is find the hidden opportunity for me. I wanted to figure out what was there that maybe other people weren't seeing, and how could I leverage that? And so those were some of the key questions. And over the course of about 3 months, I came up with a 4-part marketing model that involved the internet as a platform, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sales automation, that was kind of just coming online, this cloud-based thing. I remember a while back, I ended up having a cloud-based software, but a number of years later, I said, people started talking about the cloud. And I asked my lead programmer, I go, Adam, isn't that what we're doing? He goes, yeah, we were doing the cloud before they called it the cloud. So we were really ahead of the curve. And then the next thing was mass media advertising. Now, back then, there was not social media yet. So when we talked mass media advertising, we were talking like print, direct mail, radio, TV, a lot of email, things like that. the traditional, except for email, the traditional types of advertising. And then finally, this is what really kind of lit me up. And it's what was kind of the fire that put this idea together. And that was Amazon had an affiliate program. And so the idea that you could refer somebody to a website and earn a commission, I was like, dang, that is so cool. Now we don't think of that as any big deal, but back then it was revolutionary. So I looked at all these things and I thought, geez, if I could take my sales ability and then create a system or a process or even a software to do this and put it all together, that would be amazing. Except the only problem I didn't know how to do it. So that was the catalyst for getting into it initially. Yeah. So I don't know if you had another question. I could keep going if you want.
No. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and I always like to talk to people who have been in like the internet for a while. Like making money online, creating systems and whatnot, because you've been able to see like decades of how marketing has progressed, sales has progressed, and you can kind of see, we can kind of talk about what's the difference between then and now. And
I'll give you a big difference.
Uh-huh.
So here we are talking, right?
Okay.
And I literally saw this, they say your mind's eye, whatever. I saw this being the reality. Like I saw this as being one of the huge benefits. And everything we did back then was so slow, clunky. Everything you did, your computer, the internet, software apps, everything was breaking all the time. So it was extremely frustrating because all these pieces you couldn't find like you can now. Integrations, APIs, Zapier, you can put all together. Yeah. It was smoking. It's smoking hot now. It's more exciting now than it was back then. And when I first started and I started talking about remote sales, and I want to clarify something so people are really clear about the distinction. Okay. There's internet marketing. Okay. There's affiliate marketing. There's network marketing. There's e-commerce marketing. That's not remote selling. Remote selling is being able to leverage, internet-based technology in order to help you be a more effective salesperson. For example, Zoom is one of the coolest tools, or any type of video conferencing or video meeting, because you can literally sell to somebody through this medium, right? I mean, this is crazy. When many years ago, if you wanted to sell life insurance, you would have to drive to somebody's house, and sit across their table. They have companies now that will give you leads and you could sell life insurance right through Zoom. They have roofing companies that will take a picture of your roof and through Google Earth. And then you do the deal through the internet. Like we're talking now, you could buy a car online you without even being there. You could buy a house online without it being there. And with COVID, when I first started doing this, nobody got it. It's like, and literally I was told, I was working with companies and talking to them about these concepts even before I started building my software. And this was the standard response. You can't do this. It won't work. Nobody does it this way. Don't waste your time. In fact, this is a funny story people have a hard time believing. If you are into marketing, two of the biggest names in marketing are Jay Abraham, who I'm a protégé student at Jay Abraham, and Dan Kennedy. These guys, I look at Jay Abraham as kind of a white collar marketing genius, and Dan Kennedy's a blue collar marketing genius. I mean, these guys true. If you just went on their stuff alone, you'd be golden for life on the marketing side. Brilliant guys. And so many people have built huge careers off those two guys. So when I first started doing this, I was on both their newsletters. They were both poo-pooing the internet as a fad. I am not kidding you. It's a fad. Wow. And it was because, they were entrenched in their thing and they really didn't get it. And what was interesting, because I watched this evolution, is there was marketers that took their material, translated it over the internet, and then came back and aligned with Jay and Dan and took them digital. You know what I'm saying? They took them and made them viable on that platform. But initially, these guys didn't get it. That's how transformational the internet was. And people just didn't when I was getting in 97, 98, people weren't even sure this was viable for sales and marketing. They weren't even sure. And look at it now. I mean, you can sell anything and everything. It's just mind blowing. And so the evolutionary process now is everybody's doing it, right? Everybody. COVID is like driven people to go like, I want to work from home. I want to live in a different state. I want to live in a different country. I want a lifestyle, right? It's all about lifestyle. And that was a big driving thing for me. I've worked from home. This is an exception having an office, but I've worked from home since the 80s, pretty much. There's been a few times where I've had an office, and just because things were really busy. But this is a lifestyle. We've homeschooled. We've lived all over the country since we lived in Alaska, north, south, east, west.
Wow.
And so this is something that people are attracted to now more and more. And with the internet, I don't care what your passion is or what you want to sell. There's somebody doing it, and you can get into it. It's amazing. I mean, and look at you, right? Look at you. You are doing exactly what you love. You're living where you want to live. You came from another country, and not only did you get good at it, now you're showing other people how to do your niche, right? What a life, right?
Yeah.
What a life. Yeah. So this is about lifestyle. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad you talked about that, because I think some people don't put into perspective, right, how much different and how easy it is now to just like launch offers and just sell stuff and just make money online. It's almost unreasonable for you not to be able to make just a crap ton of money with the internet, because it's not easy. You don't just wake up today and make a product and make $1 million tomorrow, but it's simple, and it's like it's possible. Like you can end the time, like I always say, like everyone's gonna make $1 million in like the course of their lifetime, right? If you make 50 grand a year, you're gonna do it in 20, right? But with the internet, the way you could collapse time is like insane.
It's insane. And that was one of the things. So when I was doing my research, I literally had this question: what is the internet, right? I didn't know. I could send an email, I could work a browser, and I could work a PC contact management system called ACT. And that was the extent of my internet skills. So, and I want to, if people just get this core concept, it makes everything. So I'm really about taking things and making them very simple, because if they're simple, they're easy, you can focus, you can get things done, right? All the internet is a hyper-speed information delivery system available on demand, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on a global basis. That's it, right? And so when you're talking about speed, it is all about speed. Speed kills. Speed kills in sports. Speed kills in business. And the thing about, I started learning sales accidentally when I was 8 years old, knocking on doors, asking people for the recyclable bottles and cans and newspapers. 8 years old, I had a little red wagon. This was in California. And back then they started recycling. And so people would save up their cans and their bottles and newspapers. Guess what? They're too lazy or they didn't have the car to take them into the recycle place. So I don't know how I figured this out, but I just knock on their doors and say, do you have any cans, bottles, or newspapers I could have? So I just want to point out something. I did my prospecting question, my presentation, and my close all in one sentence, right? And then people would give it to me. And this was like an epiphany. I was like, I can make money by talking to people. I was like, I don't have to.
It's a crazy idea.
It's a crazy idea. And anybody here that has kids knows that kids are natural salespeople, and we're always having them try to sell us, right? And you have to constantly be saying no. But we have 8 kids, and I recognize the value of sales skills in all facets of life, in everything, not just if you're doing it for a living. And so I have always been very conscientious of helping our kids learn how to sell, start their own business. And I let them get some wins in, meaning I will let them, try to negotiate or sell me with the idea of giving resistance, like I'm not going to do it. So they learn to close me, overcome objections. You got to get your kids into where they get the wins. They can't always hear the no's, right? And what that does It's just like with any salesperson, the biggest thing you need in order to make sales are you need to be somebody that people trust and somebody that people like. Those are the two core things, right? And when you're selling a product, it's something that you believe in and you have enthusiasm. If you have those 4 ingredients in the mix, everything else will come into play. And so it's so important that we look at what the internet now is a vehicle to sell in whatever your flavor is. You might like the tech side internet. You might, like more automated side, like affiliate marketing. You might like more relationship side, like network marketing. And you might like, having the e-commerce digital store thing. All those are a type of remote sales. The remote sales I specialize is this person-to-person thing where you're really connecting people. I love that. And this is what I tell people. Sales is the magic pixie dust that makes things grow, right? In your business, if you, and what is the thing that leads to sales? Leads, right? So if you master lead generation and sales, you can do anything. Every company needs leads. Every company needs sales. And as you go along, just like you've done, just like I've done, just like many people have done, they get good at some type of sales. And then if they have the desire and the capacity, the next level might be to run a sales team or run a sales department or become a vice president of sales or a sales leader. And then the next step is have your own business, right? But you can start at the bottom of the ladder with sales. It's one of those amazing fields where you can just start learning the ropes. And over time, you can make 6 figures, 7 figures if you're crazy and you put all the right things together. Start your own business. I had a friend tell me the most amazing story about this guy that became super successful. I don't know how much money the guy was making, but my friend said he was making a lot, and I don't want to put a number because I don't know what it was. But what I want to explain is how he started. This was in South Africa, and he started by selling a single vitamin pill on the corner of a street. That's how he started. And then he went to selling bottles, and then he started building sales teams and doing all this. And then he ended up being very successful. It's amazing, no matter where you start in life, where you can take yourself learning the skills of sales. And like we were just talking about with the internet, the speed at which you could do things once you have a skill that you can deploy is mind-blowing, right? I watch your stuff. You got a great attitude, a great personality. You're kind. There's this balance, and I think people that have come from rough starts or with not a lot, they know how hard it is to get to the top, and they really can recognize the struggle to get there. And so there's a kindness, you balance it, right? And I think the most balanced people are people that have a drive to be successful, but at the same token, they have a kindness to help other people up. It's a very good balance versus it's all about, I got to be at the top of the pyramid. I got to make all the money. I'm in it just for me. That's a very unbalanced type of person. And that's the other side of the equation of being successful in sales is who you are as a person. When I first got into sales, and everybody experiences this, it's kind of like the light side and the dark side. And you're going to see people that are greedy, manipulative, conniving. They don't care about the customer. They're going to take advantage of them, right? And you, as a person, as an individual, you have to make a decision. You go, am I that kind of person or am I not? Now, if you were raised with the right kind of values, like my dad was a Navy fighter pilot, Blue Angel test pilot. So red, white, and blue in my house. Okay, none of that stuff. And so when I first got exposed to, you can lie to make a sale, it couldn't even fathom it.
That's it. Yeah. Right? I couldn't either. Yeah, because I remember.
Right.
I was. Go on. I don't know.
No, really go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I remember someone had just took a screenshot of my testimonials and been trying to sell people on organic marketing. I couldn't even believe people did stuff like that.
Right.
To me, yeah.
Right. And I got in one industry where it was so sleazy and conniving and manipulative and deceitful. My wife, she goes, you got to quit being so naive. And I literally had this one business, 6.5 years in Texas. And in 6.5 years, I had one bad check that was given to me. I was one of the top sales guys in the country doing what I did. So we sold a lot of stuff. I had one bad check, and the guy felt so bad, and he made it good in like 2 or 3 days. So I was used to that kind of bandwidth of operating and dealing with people. So as a salesperson, you have to kind of decide, like, am I going to be that way or not? And I want to encourage everybody, when that moment comes, and it will come, hold your ground, stand firm. You know, flint face, not doing it. And if that's the way they operate, go someplace else, you know, shake the dust off your feet and head down the road. And one of the guys that I think is fundamental to every salesperson's education, little old fashioned, he's no longer around, is Zig Ziglar. And anybody that's been in, older guy like me, I'll be 60 this year. Any guy my age will tell you Zig Ziglar that's been in sales will tell you Zig Ziglar was fundamental to their sales knowledge, skills, development. And the big reason why is he was all about the personal character of the individual salesperson being foundational for their success, right? Like, who you are is what will attract people, right? And he would say, he had little quips, you know, you can have everything in life if you just help enough other people get what they want, right? And that's a really powerful motivator to live by, right? And he said, if you have something that your customer or potential customer needs, you have a moral obligation to sell it to them. You know, that's firepower. But that denotes the fact that you really believe in it and you know that your customer needs it. And so there's a lot of wiggle room when you don't have a lot of skill to make sales simply on being likable, trustworthy, being enthusiastic about what you're selling, and you believe in it, right? That is the foundation of everything. And one of the biggest mistakes, and I've made it, we've all made it in sales, is where somebody says, you can make 6 figures selling this. And you go, wow. And you're young, you don't know, oh, I want to make 6 figures. What are you selling? Well, I don't care, you know, and you get in and then you realize, I don't really care about this. And then you wonder why you're failing. You're not making successful. I got the funniest story. So this happened to me in my early 20s. You know, you can make 6. This is like in the 80s, right? 6 figures in the 80s was big money. 6 figures now in the United States is like get by money, right? It's like baseline nowadays, and that's tragic. But so I get my license and I go to my first appointment. And in my middle of my first appointment, I had this epiphany that all of a sudden I have no interest in selling life insurance. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't care about these people. It was like, this has got to be the most boring thing in the world. And so I finished up the appointment, and that was it. That was the end of my life insurance career. But I recognized early on that you have to be into what you're selling, right? Right? Are you into what you're doing?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's funny.
Totally.
It's funny you mentioned life insurance because I became a broker not too long ago, and I just haven't even like bought my first lead because it's like I don't know. Maybe I'll get into it, but the passion just right now is not there.
No, and this is how I you know, this is my personal belief system. I believe we all have something inside us that we're assigned to do, like it's implanted in there, right? And then the journey is discovering that. And some of us discover it. Some of us know it right out of the gate. Like, I'm always amazed at people that when they're like 8 years old, I know what I want to be. And then they do it and they're really good at it. And like, that's their life thing. I just like blows me away. Most people in sales kind of fall into it by happenstance. Like, I don't want to do anything else, but I want to like make a lot of money. What can I do? Sales, right? But I had a very interesting experience. I never really would have considered sales. Most people don't grow up saying at 12 years old, I want to be a sales guy. Have you ever heard that? I've never heard that. No. Nobody says that. No. So it's kind of a thing that happens after, you know, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to do all this stuff. I don't want to do manual labor. I don't want to do blah, 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 whatever it is. What are my options to make money? Sales. These guys all say I can make good money. I'm going to get into sales. So I had a really interesting experience that was the anchor point for me getting into professional sales. So my dad, after he retired from the Navy, he eventually got into real estate, commercial real estate, had his own commercial real estate company. And when I was in the Marine Corps for a very short bit of time, and when I got out, I wanted to start a business or do something. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't want a job, right? And so my dad, one of the things he did is he paid for me to go to a course on personality profiling. So we started this conversation about your sign, right? Which helps indicate a little bit about your personality. And that stuff's really fascinating. Well, personality profiling is about finding out what are your dominant personality traits and then how they interrelate with other people's personality traits, how you communicate with them, and in this specifically how you sell to them, right? So I came up in this particular personality profile. They had driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. So driver, and expressive is and then amiable is, oh, can you be my friend? And analytical is, can I see the details? Right? That's it in a real nutshell. So I was high D, high E, driver, expressive, and he says this is he goes, if you ever decide, because I wasn't in sales, he goes, if you ever decide to get in sales, I would love to see your career because you would do very well. So and we all have all those personality traits. It's just what's more dominant. What do we operate more naturally in? And what is our preferred mode? Like I prefer going a million miles an hour, being jacked, and you can tell, right? I love that. And can you imagine me as a kid? Oh my gosh, I was a handful. And but what I want to say is anybody, I don't care if you're a driver, expressive, amiable, or analytical, you have all those within you, just at certain capacities and percentages, and you can be successful in any of those capacities in sales. Some people say, well, I can't be successful in sales. That's an attitude. That's fine. If you don't want to be in sales, that's great. But I just want to point out is every single personality type I've seen successful analyticals in sales. I've seen successful amiables in sales. I've seen successful expressives in sales, and I've seen successful drivers in sales. Now we're talking, this is a podcast. I got to be running my mouth. but when the best salespeople are the best listeners, just like you're doing. And I could tell you're a very good listener. You're waiting, you're pausing, you're taking it in, you're thinking about the next question. Who is one of the best listeners on the planet that we all know about? Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's podcast, he is fantastic, right? But one of the best things is he's a listener. And if you pay attention to his style, what he does is he does not have a set question that he's going to ask regardless of what you said next, right? Now, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have them. It just means he's not obvious about it, and he does it very conversationally, right? And this is the art of a master salesperson, is being able to have a conversation and being able to do it in such a way that people trust you, they like you. They can tell you believe and are enthusiastic about what you sell. I'm not saying overexcited, but there's a true enthusiasm for what you're doing, right? And that you're hearing what their situation is, their needs, their problems, and you kind of come up through that divergent conversation with the exact pieces that deliver the information they need that is for their benefit, not ours, right? Because it's their money. We get the benefit of the commission, but they're not buying something to give us a commission, right? They're not like, hey, I'll buy this from you you get a commission.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. The only time that happens is when somebody's selling you Girl Scout cookies. I'll buy it. So you make some money. I'm going to get fat and diabetes. So give me 20 boxes, but I want you to have the commission. So, but this is what we have to understand is that there's personality types in sales. All of them can be successful. Some of them are more prone to be successful in sales, but we can all be successful in sales. And it just depends on what you're selling and the process and methodology. You got to be comfortable doing it. And one of my most early sales experiences was where I was selling encyclopedias while I was in college. And the sales manager was trying to get me to be exactly like him. If you've ever been in that situation where they're trying to clone themselves, it never works unless like, once in a blue moon.
Yeah, that's the problem with school.
Right? They're trying to clone school. People don't realize this, but the modern day public school system was literally designed to create or produce compliant workers. It was not designed to create entrepreneurs or innovators or thinkers or creators or, all these things that, I mean, all you have to do is look at the curriculum, right? And all it's designed to do is jam information out, regurgitate it to get some kind of rating, and then go on to the next course without any engagement of actually applying what you learn. And if you actually were applying most of what you learned in school, there'd be nothing to apply because it's worthless knowledge. It's unbelievable. And where it's really unbelievable is when young people go to college for 4, 6, 8 years. And now there's some benefits to going to college, but there's a lot of non-benefits to going to college. I mean, I went in and out of college 5 times and I kept going. And it was just, I was wired not for school. And a lot of boys and young men are not wired for the way they teach school. We're not wired to sit on our butts for 6 hours, have data dumped in us, and then sit there and be like, "Ooh, this is cool. I'm learning something."
No.
We're very interactive, hands-on, visual, experiential, learn by mentoring. So we have a failed school system, and we've homeschooled our kids. And every single kid is different. We deal with, and we're raising them the same way, but one kid's this way and another kid's that way. And when you have a public school system, it's just everybody's going to be one way. And that's the thing I want to point out with sales. This is a good pivot point for this. You can't treat every single customer the same way, right? Like if everybody's gotten the telemarketing phone call, right? And the person on the other end is a robot, even though they're not a robot, they're an automaton. And as soon as they open their mouth, 5 seconds into it, "Hi, this is so-and-so, and I'm calling you from so-and-so, and we're here to sell you so-and-so," and click, right? And there's no engagement. Why is there no engagement? And this is really important. We're physical beings, but we also have a spirit inside us, right? And we've all walked on like a used car lot, and the guy came on, and before he opened his mouth, what? We go, "This guy's a sleazebag." Before he said anything, right? We could tell by his spirit, his disposition, his aura, whatever you want to call it, right? There's all kinds of different words people use depending on their framework. But the bottom line is just like we're talking on Zoom, or just like we're talking on a phone or whatever, or just like when you're writing copy, there's literally a spirit that's coming through that. So you have the physical, and you started a group kind of along this concept, and people have their different, and I get it, people have their different appearance, opinions, and a lot of it is what you experienced. Okay. And I'll tell you a crazy story in a second that really was radical thought that really kind of transformed my life. But your spirit, and this is what's missing in a lot of sales training, is we never talk about our spirit, because who we are, the essence of who we are, it comes out in our spirit, in our voice, in our attitude, in how we write, how we think. And a lot of times I having trained literally tens of thousands of people in remote sales, because you can do it with remote sales globally. I could take one salesperson, give them the same business, same product, same script, same everything the same leads. One guy goes, "This sucks." The other guy goes, "This rocks." Right? And I had this happen countless times. And so, when you're doing what I was doing at that level with that many people, the big question you're always asking is why? Why? What's the difference? And the difference always is that individual's person, their personality. A lot of times, some people say, "Well, this isn't working." And when you're dealing with these people, you realize this person isn't even a likable person. If you're not likable or trustworthy, guess what? you shouldn't be in the sales game till you fix that broken wheel, right? And I think every single person, when they first come into sales, should be read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And then they should read it again, and probably again. And then once a year, read it again. Because that there, if you never read a book on sales, you'd be covered with that book. You'd be covered with one book. And I'm one of those guys that if you give me what I call anchor points, if it is a powerful anchor point, and anybody that's been successful knows this, they have made their framework of what they do to be successful fairly simple, right? Is it pretty simple for what you do? You have some singular things you focus on, right? And a lot of people overcomplicate it. And what's crazy, when you're going through this journey, it's overwhelming. There's all these, especially nowadays. Gosh, I can't imagine all the pieces that you have to put together to be successful with the internet now. It's overwhelming. And that's why it's so important that people align with a group or a team first, and they add their piece, and slowly trying to solo this. Holy cow. It is brutal, right? And you have to kind of collaborate and build a tribe and do it together and find out who's good at what. They have a concept called team selling. But this is what we have to move into by having all those pieces. But this anchor point thought, whatever that is your firepower. So this goes back to what I was referring to a little bit ago. I was having this philosophical discussion with a friend of mine, and he owned I'm not a vegetarian. I love meat, but he had a vegetarian restaurant.
Right.
Just because I love meat doesn't mean I won't eat my vegetables. I just like them pre-processed by whatever I eat. So they pre-digest them, right? That's a meat eater joke. So, but these guys, or this guy, we were having a conversation. We would have these philosophical conversations, and he had been raised one way, and then he'd gone off in a different direction. And they weren't debates or arguments. They were just really interesting conversations. And this was in the early 90s. So this was like 30 years ago. And he said the most fascinating thing to me. He said, Brett, you're only talking about what you've read, not what you've experienced. And he was, for the subject matter we were talking about, philosophically, he was spot on. Like I had nothing to say. It wasn't like, I literally was like stunned because it was so insightful, because he was coming from a place where he'd experienced things and he knew that he knew, right? And that was kind of a trigger point for some things that started happening later on in my life. So there's a video that I watched a number of months ago, and it's by a guy. He's a thought leader. He's an entrepreneur. He's an angel investor. And he made a very interesting observation. He said, guys like Elon Musk, we'll take him. He's in the news all the time. Now, he is successful because he's completely outside the framework of everybody, right? How he thinks, how he does things, everything. So when you're wanting to be successful, all these people say 10 steps to do this, 3 steps to do that. He calls those prescriptions. Now, those are okay. Like we could say 10 steps to do a podcast the way Desmond sets it up, right? They're just, you get this service, you set it up, but it's just a framework, right? But if we were saying how to be like Desmond, how to be successful like Desmond, how to build an audience, how many of those components are just you? How many of those are things you can't really communicate? How many of those things are from your life experiences, right? How many of those things are uniquely your gifts? You can't give somebody a checklist on that, right? And one of the most empowering things anybody can get being a salesperson is being themselves, being them best selves. And that takes a while to get to, right? I mean, my 20s, I played rugby and I designed everything I did was, and what I'm doing today is because I started designing my life so I could play rugby. I was like, I'd play rugby anywhere. I was just nuts, and I'd play all day, and I just get the crap beat out of myself, and I would go, this is the best, right? Gives you an idea. I'm little screw loose there,
Right.
getting beat up all day and loving it, right? but I loved it. And so, but that was an expression of who I am. But I think your 20s are really about, because you're in home, you got your parents, you're in a structured school system. Everybody is telling you what to be and how to be. But that doesn't necessarily, unless you've been in the right environment, that doesn't mean that's you, right? And that's why you see a lot of people when they leave home, if their parents and their learning environment did not give them the ability to discover and start expressing themselves in a healthy way, not in a crazy way, but in a healthy, good way. A lot of unhealthy expression is just from acting out, from being in poor situations, poor environment, social environment, poor upbringing, and that's tragic. And you can see that because the screws aren't all connected, and that's tragic. I actually do youth rugby to mentor youth kids, because there's a lot of kids that grow up in situations that they simply have no control over. And if somebody doesn't catch them when they're young, they could have just a tragic life and end up, potential and destiny unfulfilled. But your 20s are really about who you are and finding out who you are and discovering what you're about. So all these guys, these guys that come into sales, and the first thing is I want to make a 6 figures. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. There's nothing wrong if you're doing it honestly and providing a good service. There's nothing wrong with having a good financial goal. But the problem is, it's when you make it the end goal and only goal. Like, I'm only focused on money, because what happens is you short circuit a lot of things. And let me give you a sports analogy. Let's say you're on a football team and I'm the coach. And all I do every practice is say, okay, we're going to win. 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 Okay. But we don't do all the things that we need to do to lead up to winning. Right. So it's the same thing in sales. If I just go close the sale, close the sale, close the sale, close the sale. But if I haven't done all the things that are needed to make closing the sale fairly easy, then it's going to be a pretty brutal walk, right? I'm focused on the wrong thing. I'm focused on closing the sale, make the commission. But if you do it strategically and intelligently, you can put all the pieces together that you'll naturally get the sale and naturally get the commission, because it's the end result of a well thought out process, right? Just like what you're doing in your business, right? I can tell the way you write, the way you communicate. It's very intelligent. It's very thoughtful. And it shows experience of being in the trenches, right? And so that's what draws people to you, because they recognize that overall position, right? And it's not manufactured. There's guys that manufacture it, you can, people in their spirit can read the difference. And so, thought leader and influencer kind of gets thrown around a little too much, because just because you want to be a thought leader or just because you want to be an influencer doesn't mean you are. A true one is somebody that has thoughts that are of themselves as a result of all their experiences. And they have a saying, standing on the shoulders of giants. This is where you've taken other people's pieces of where they're at, but you've amalgamated them into yourself. You come up with your own recipe, and you've taken it to the next level, and you're expressing it yourself from you, your way, right? Same thing applies to sales. And so this evolutionary process, when you get somebody, they have this thing called 10,000 hours to mastery, right? So if you were doing 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, that's 2,000. So if you're doing sales for full time for a year, that's 2,000 hours. So 5 years, theoretically. I don't know where they came up with 10,000 hours, but the point being is there's mastery, and mastery. There's 4 levels, they say, of learning. So first is you're a subconscious incompetent, which means you don't know that you don't know, right? And that you don't know what you don't know, so it doesn't matter, right? La di da di da. And then there's subconscious or conscious incompetent. That means you're an idiot, or you're stupid, or you don't know, right? And that's frustrating. Like if you're trying to do something and you're very aware of, like I have, because of what I do and being a pioneer in remote sales, I was very aware at the beginning of this how much I didn't know and how stupid I was. I mean, like Stupidville. and I'm going into areas where I'm jumping off the cliff, free falling, going, you know, that fear and trepidation and feeling like an idiot. That's part of being an entrepreneur. So then there's conscious competent. That means, you know, but you're like, it's like when you're first riding a bike and you're like, and then there's subconscious competent. Like, you can get on a bike or drive. Like, have you ever driven a car? You get in, the next minute you've driven 20, 30 minutes, you're there. And if you thought about it, you really like weren't paying attention to anything, right? That is subconscious competent. And that's when you achieve mastery. Like I'm doing these hot seats where I don't want anything to know about what these guys want. And I love just people that are struggling, especially young people. They come on and I say, write up whatever questions you want. And then we'll start talking about it. And they said, do you want me to send you the questions? I say, no. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't do that. Number one, it keeps me mentally sharp. You know, you got to do things when you get older to stay really sharp, right? Because we're all getting older. And the older you get, mental decline is one of them, unless you're doing the right things. Exercise, eating right, you know, mental stimulation. So I like, and as salespeople, we have to be able to think on our feet, right? So we need to be in situations where we are thinking on our feet. So, but one of the things is I want to be constantly challenged. They may say something I've never heard before, highly unlikely, but I like it if they do, because, you know, I'll tell them, if I don't know, I don't know. And this is a very important concept for new salespeople. Never bluff your way through something you don't know. You got to be okay. It's okay to not know. I don't know. I'm brand new, you know, and I have mental hacks that I'll some mental hacks as we're, let's see the time, just so I make sure we're, you know, staying within our time frame. Leave some good tips here. But when you don't know something, it's okay. But when you do know something, then it's an open door. And when you're communicating with people in sales, you have to be aware that it's kind of a dance. It's like a date. This is the best analogy I can give for sales. It's like your first date, or you're trying to get a date. You know, do they like you? Do I like them? You know, do I get enough signals that I want to ask them out? You know, do we, you know, qualifying questions, we go on a date, sales presentation. And then at the end, the close is what? A good night kiss, you know, whether it's a third, fourth date, whatever. But if everything goes right and there's that mutual engagement, then that kiss at the end is a natural conclusion of a good date, right? If that's your thing. And so that is the sales process. It's not a wrestle. It's a kind of a flowing dance of a dating ritual, with the kiss being at the end. And, you know, or getting married, you know, you can throw that in there. That's a long-term customer. Right. And then if you have kids, that's repeat sales. Okay. So let's talk about mental hacks. Let's give some people some things to go. Now
before you continue, I do want to just kind of summarize a little bit of what you said.
Fire away. I've been talking on.
No, it's good. You're pretty much answering a lot of the questions I was like thinking as you were speaking. So
you gave me a list of some of the things we were talking about, so I remembered that, and we're threading it.
Gotcha. So with the big idea I did get was, it wasn't a lot of tactical stuff like follow up with people 3 times and none of that tactical stuff. Use these words, none of that, right? It was kind of big picture. And you did mention, you know, when it comes to, let's say, marketing, right? There's kind of a system you follow, right? It's kind of a framework, and then the elements within it change. So like, for example, marketing, it's like, okay, traffic, right? Like my new messaging is, I use the term advocate. Then there's a message or cause, then there's your funnel or campaign, then an offer, right? But you know, the world is about duality, right? So there's good and there's bad messaging, there's good and there's a bad offer, right? But the principles stay the same. And like, what will make your marketing campaign work is like how you show up to the world. Like, what's like, my new messaging is unique to me. I have been having this whole spiritual awakening, and people are recognizing that. Like, You've recognized that a bunch of people are like, man, like, you know, it is polarizing. Some people are like, man, you're using faith to sell products. Like, I don't like this guy anymore. But my people, the people who are really gonna rock with me, buy
They're on
from
the
me.
same bandwidth.
Exactly. And so the big idea I did get was this idea I talk about, which is like, you know, self-love, self-education, self-awareness, right? Yourself. Like, I heard somewhere that you don't really have business problems, you just have personal problems that reflect in your business, right? You know, like what you're talking about with the salesperson who you know, could get the same script, everything, but it won't work because of who that person is, right? They're not passionate. They don't have any energy for the thing. So the big idea I got is, you know, discover who you are. And that's like the idea behind my new community too. Like, discover who you are as a person. If you believe in human design, look into that, or, you know, look more into like the scientific stuff, like, you know, your personality, you know, personality tests and whatnot.
Look at you. You're all lit up because, you know, we see, you are expressing what really is in you at a high level, because it's what you're about, right? So we as beings, human beings, we are designed to be an expression of something, right? And it can be their light and life, and we're a conduit of that, or it can be darkness because we take in the negativity that's around us and we let that be, we're a conduit of that. We have a choice, right? And you mentioned this thing. I am big on frameworks, process, methodology, systems. You know, people cannot be duplicated, but people should not be treated as cogs. And so there's a fine line. So a lot of guys will get in the frameworks, process, methodology, but then they treat their salespeople like cogs, when the reason why you have your process, your methodology, your systems, those kinds of frameworks is so that you have a roadmap, right? And you can see how it's doing and you can adjust it. But within sales, remote sales, the glue, the power, is the relationship connectivity you have between your sales people and the customer or the prospect or potential customer. And so those people, those salespeople, are the representation of your company. If I'm a jerk, the company's a jerk. If I'm amazing, the company's amazing, right? And we want to look at, even though we have all this technology and automation, we always want to look at all the places where we can have human engagement. And it does not always have to be in a salesy capacity, right? It can be, we're simply looking for that connectivity, right? Imagine if I have some friends and they're friends, but they're salespeople. And they can never, ever break out of their sales mode. So I don't care what you're talking about or what you're doing. They're so ingrained in this sales framework. If you say something, they're acting like you're closing them or you're using some sales technique and you're just talking. And they're like, oh, you tried to do this to me. And no, I didn't. Oh, well, okay. You know, they've gone off the deep end. Right. And we have to realize, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And our customers are humans, and our potential customers are human, and our support team is human. And the more we can be that within the framework of selling, the more people don't realize that a lot of really top end guys, I mean, 7-figure guys, 8-figure guys, whatever, they're really good guys. They're really nice guys. And people are often surprised. Now, that doesn't mean you have guys on the other end of the spectrum, because you can choose light side or dark side, your choice, take your pick. But a lot of times the dark side gets so much more coverage that people think that's the only way you can be successful in sales. And so they go like, well, I'm just going to emulate that. And then they get into a pattern of doing that. And then they think, and they have some success with it, and they think, well, this is the way. It's not the way. It's a way, but you can go a couple ways, and you have the opportunity to make the choice. And this is where I think mentoring comes in play. So it's so important in sales that people are not just trained. Okay. And we've lost mentoring just because of how fast and things go, right? But it used to be many, many hundreds of years ago. If somebody wanted to be a master, say a blacksmith, right? They would take on an apprentice at a young age, 8, 9 years old. And this apprentice would be there for maybe a decade, and he would do all the scut work and then gradually learn the skills up. And then he would go on to become a master himself. Well, that mentoring was a shaping process of ethic and skill and character and all that. We kind of lost that in our society in general, not just sales. But I want to leave with a couple hacks that will help people in sales. So when I am dealing with new salespeople or starting up a new sales project, my number one objective is to get people moving as fast forward as possible with minimal resistance. And so there's some things that I do to do that. Number one is when you're first starting out, and I do this to myself on brand new projects, is everything is activity based, not performance based. And what I mean by that is, say I have my goal is 100 outreaches a day, right? I have not earned the right to have a performance-based goal. Like I can't say, oh, I made 20 appointments. I have, or 5 sales or whatever. That's not fair. We know little kids, when they start learning to walk over, couple weeks, couple months, they go from falling on their face to, can't keep up with them because they're all over the place, right? It's a natural evolution. If you're doing the activity itself, you cannot help but get better, right? So it's the responsibility of a sales trainer, sales coach, sales manager, vice president, sales business owner to create an environment that allows people the opportunity to fail, i.e. fall down and learn without the pressure of performance, without the pressure of, we're hardly getting by. That's not fair to put on salespeople, right? We need to treat them like toddlers trying to learn how to walk and run so that they can be an expression of who they are within a sales environment. So they're most empowered to be successful. If you're constantly beating people down, 10 appointments a day, 5 sales a day, when they have not learned the skills yet to do that, it's like taking a football team that's never practiced and say, win, 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 win. You see what I'm saying? They've had no practice. They've had no scrimmages. They've had no real games. And so you have to graduate that up. So activity-based goals that lead to performance-based goals. I got a whole story on that, but it'd take too long to sell.
Go ahead.
Oh, we got 4 minutes. Are we on a timeline?
Yeah. No, we generally they're like an hour, but we could go for an extra
Well,
hour.
I actually have another meeting on the top of the hour. I got set up last minute. But we can do another session. I enjoy this. A lot to cover. So here's the other thing. We'll just leave on this, and then you can wrap up however you want. But everything is practice. Okay. One of the most important things that you do to yourself in sales, and it's a problem for all salespeople, is they personalize and internalize failure. What they term as failure, right? You can't get good at anything until you fail. One of the things that, like, I'll do really high-end consulting, and I'll tell people one of the benefits of when you've been doing something a long time is I've learned all the things not to do. Right? It's not just what to do, it's what not to do. So if you have 100 things and you've learned that 85 to 90 of those things are what not to do, guess what? We just focus on the things of what to do. So we accelerate and can accentuate what we're doing very quickly, right? So the only way to get there is what? Fail. If I give you a selling system and I tell you, okay, read this script, do exactly what I say, and don't deviate, you have no framework for learning. If something doesn't work for you, if it's not your personality, like scripts. If I write a script a certain way and I get Desmond, sell this way, you'd look at me and go, Brett, I don't talk like that. And I learned a long time ago that does not work. And this goes back to what you were saying a little bit ago. You're right. I always look at things top end first, and everything comes down. Philosophy, mindset. Everything has a philosophy behind it, right? This product, there we go, getting the video. Okay. It doesn't matter what it is. Everything has a philosophy, knowing or unknowing. You have a philosophy that you're operating from. The products you sell have a philosophy that they were created by. And you have to realize that everything is sales. So from the start of customer service, all the way to accounting, all the way to how you handle every aspect of it is all part of your sales process. And it emanates from the philosophy of how you treat people, how you treat customers, how you think about money, how you think about what you're delivering as a service. That's all an emanation of who originated it, the company owner. That's based on philosophy. And this goes back to this group you're starting. I believe what you're doing there is so important because people need to dig deeper. You know, we had this, they talk about ages. We had the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Agricultural Age, the Industrial Age, then the Information Age, and now we're in what's called the Knowledge Age. And I think there's one level that goes beyond that, but it's this age of where we're able to take information and our spirit, put them together. And the spirit part, I think, is being neglected. Like, for example, if everything is what you know, rather than what can come through you, you're limited. This is why I think NLP is very limited, because it's all about your brain hack, and you're overriding your spirit. And you're saying, I can control everything in myself and others by how I manage my mind. So you're basically blocking out the spirit that could be coming in and adding things that you have no idea. I cannot tell you how many times I've had things come through me that have been part of what I needed for my journey that I had no way of knowing. Wouldn't everybody like to have that? We as human beings do not always know what we need to know from our own experiences or what we have in our head. And when you open yourself up to that, you open yourself up to a completely different pathway of life. But just like you found out, there's people that are going to go like, you can't do that. Business and that stuff doesn't mix. It's not about business and faith or spirituality. It's about being fully enabled of how you were created to be. If you were a toy and you had the ability to have a power with batteries, and I gave it to a kid without the batteries, the kid's going like this. That's us without that spiritual conduit. You put the batteries in, same car, but now it's got power that it does not have on its own. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Awesome. So you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Stay on the path. There's people that need to hear your message, and anybody that's come to this country from another country because of the betterment of their family and their lives, I have beyond respect for. Beyond. So, and then to you to rise up above standard average and to do what you're doing is most admirable. Kudos.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, a few last things. Like I remember when I was a kid, right? I told myself I wanted to be an inventor. This is like, doubling down on what you've been saying. I wanted to be an inventor, right? And then I had an interview with someone else, and then they were talking about how like somehow we always do become well, not everyone, because some people never really become who they were meant to be. But when you really like live in your truth, you kind of become that person that you thought about when you were younger. And when she had said that, I'm like, well, I wanted to be an inventor, not a marketer. And then she was like, well, what do you do as a marketer? And I create, right? I create offers, I create campaigns, messages. So it is crazy how this could be a whole nother conversation.
It is, and we could talk about that another time. But what I want to point out is there's two ways of looking at it. One way is a lot of people that went until they tap into that, connection, is they think that was of them. They don't realize that was planted in them, and then they're drawn towards those things that was their purpose. So you were called to what you're doing, and this is your unique path of expressing it, right? And sometimes it's not clear, and you got to go through a lot of experiences or training to get to where you're at the place where you're activated in your in that role. Right?
Yeah, and that's what my human design coach. If you ever have a time to watch that interview or look into human design, look into it, because that's what they told me. Like I need to just do and experiment with different things. I'm an action-oriented person, and then that's what brought me to this point. Like it took me 5 years to come to this, spiritual awakening and whatever, right? And the last thing I want to say is when it comes to your marketing, right? My messaging recently has been attracting like various people, and one of them is Brett, right? I continue to share my message every day, and it attracts people like Brett, and we can have these great conversations. So, for you guys with your marketing, just like show up as your authentic self, right? All I really do, like some people think I don't really think that hard about my content. I really just dump my brain on.
That is such an important part, because you can tell the difference when somebody is just trying to post something to get eyeballs versus somebody that's really expressing something. And the word content is so overused,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody used some kind of automated app to post on something I wrote, and it just said awesome content, right? And it had nothing to do with content. You know, it was hilarious. And that's a phenomenal concept that people need to realize is don't post just because you think to post. And what the people that are real, like Gary Vee, right? He's just a conduit of authenticity and an expression of wisdom and practicality and knowledge for being on the front lines of doing the grind. And then he's sharing those experiences to help elevate other people's mindset about what is possible. That's all he's doing.
That's all he's doing.
And he has to do it because if you're wired like that, you get to a certain place. Hopefully it's not about the money. It's literally, you are a conduit of stuff that is supposed to be expressed. You know, freely give what's been freely given, right? There's a place, I get it, you can monetize it. Gary Vee's not hurting for money. You know, so it's not like he's Mother Teresa or anything, but he realizes there's a portion, everybody has to have a portion of their life where they're freely giving. They have to. That's how we are all wired. So good job, man. Thanks for time.
Yeah, this could be a 2-hour conversation.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah, and
we'll do it again when you're up for it. You know, give it some air. Next time you want to get off the trail, let me know.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, I'm definitely reposting this in the spiritual laws of marketing community because they need to hear this.
Have at it, man. Wherever you want to.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, you know, thank you so much for letting me interview you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
I've learned a ton, and I know the audience has too. You guys know what to do: YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, Facebook, comment. And so, with that being said, this has been another episode of the Marketers Roundtable, and I will see you guys later.
Okay, thanks, Desmond. Bye bye.